Welcome back to Modern Josephus. I'm here today to react to someone talking about Gods and Generals, which is a Civil War film, one of my favorite Civil War films. And I have seen this before, but I've never posted my thoughts about it on here. Oh wow, I'm noticing that big black hole right there, right there. I have to put my books in. I'm reorganizing my bookshelf because, as you know, every single time you get a new book, you have to reorganize to fit it in where it's supposed to go. So, I got, I think, 3 books I have to slide in there somewhere. So, anyway, pardon that big gap. But yeah, so I'm gonna go ahead and react to a man by the name of Atun-Shei, and he has some disagreements on one of my favorite Civil War films. It isn't my favorite, and I do see problems with it. I'm not going to say that it is the best or the most desirous of movies as far as some of the themes that they ignore or don't talk about. But sometimes I think some people can be overly critical about things. So we'll take a look at it. And then I did notice that, talking about the Civil War, Matt Walsh, so he's been doing this series where he started off talking about slavery and the true or the real story of slavery. I think that's what he kind of calls it. And then he did the real story of Native Americans, which I have not seen. I did see the slavery one, and maybe I should react to it and kind of give my thoughts on it and then do the Native American one. But now he has one about the Civil War, the real story of the Civil War. So I don't know if he's going to take a more pro-Confederate side or a more pro-Union side. We shall see, I guess. And then I can either build it up or tear it down, whichever way I feel or how it goes. So we'll see about that. I know it just came out. I saw an ad like on Facebook or something like that. But I will definitely be reviewing it, probably reacting to it live with you guys. I might even do the Native American live with you all. The live as in first time reacting. I'm not going to go live on YouTube. It would be nice. I have thought about doing it, but right now I'm just too busy. But so do a live reaction, I guess we could say, like first time reaction. Do the slavery one as well and get my reaction, but I've seen that one before, and then do the Civil War one and see how that goes. But anyway, without further ado, let us go ahead and get into Atun-Shei and his depiction of, or his thoughts on the movie Gods and Generals. So I do want to say before I start this that there's several parts here. We're only going to look at the first part, then there's part 2, which I may do at another time. It's just that it is a 44-minute long video, so if I add more to it, it's just going to go, if I do the whole thing, it's just going to go for an hour and a half or 2 hours maybe. So we'll just watch the first part. So let's go ahead and get into this.
Gods and Generals is the most offensive Civil War movie since the birth of a nation. It's also objectively terrible. The extended edition is nearly 5 hours long, and frankly, I'd rather face a firing squad than put myself...
So it is, for me, it is not the most offensive. Now, in order to understand a little bit, Atun-Shei is very pro-Union, which I am too, but he's pro-Union to the point where he hates the Confederacy, and like literally hates. And he grew up in the South, so I guess he was taught a lot of pro-Confederacy point of view, whereas I was taught more of a pro-Union point of view. So I don't have that same animosity toward it, and he apparently does not. He really hates this movie. I would not compare it to The Birth of a Nation, which was terrible propaganda back in the early 1900s. And I definitely do like this movie. It's really well done. I don't think it's bad as far as how it's as far as the acting and things like that. I do not think it's bad. A lot of people complain of a lot of speeches a lot of speechifying, and it probably has more than Gettysburg, which is the first part of this Civil War thing. There's been two movies on books that are based on one, the author is the father, the other, the author is the son. This one is based on the son's work, whereas Gettysburg, which was made in '93, was based on the father's work, historical fiction. Anyway.
Through it again. It's exhausting and sanctimonious, and if you're not a huge Civil War buff like me, you'll just get nothing out of it.
See, I don't know why he is against this scene. This is probably one of the best scenes, and a scene that actually depicts what happened many times during that war.
But oddly enough, this dull, flaccid, utterly inane excuse for entertainment is an extremely effective piece of propaganda. Watching this, I get the creepy sense that the entire reason Gods and Generals exists is to convince Civil War buffs that the Confederacy wasn't really all that bad, that it was about states' rights after all, and that the antebellum South was just a porch-sitting, lemonade-sipping paradise.
So it depends on what we're talking about. Obviously, there were states like South Carolina who started off the whole secession thing in the first place, where slavery was the central reason for their departure from the Union. But this movie doesn't focus on South Carolina. It focuses on Virginia, which had a lot more nuance to the reasons why they left the Union, which we'll get into as this goes on.
Yeah, it's till the sultry, balmy South.
As we'll see, the truth was otherwise.
We'll take the ones Platt and Eliza.
Sold, Eliza and Platt, splendid.
Again, this slave owner in this film, which is 12 Years a Slave, based on a real book written by a man who was kidnapped from the North and sent to the slavery in the South. Again, I think this movie, 12 Years a Slave, takes place in Georgia or maybe not even our Mississippi, deep South we're talking about. Whereas Gods and Generals focuses a lot more on Virginia.
Before we proceed, I'd like to get one thing absolutely clear. The Confederate States of America existed primarily to preserve and expand the institution of slavery. Confederate soldiers were fighting for slavery, and they knew it.
That's not an opinion, it's a fact.
As the saying goes,
facts don't care about your feelings.
If you disagree, I encourage you to watch.
But see, then you have moments in the movie where it's like this, and everybody, most Civil War historians, no matter how they feel about Gettysburg, love this whole sequence of Fredericksburg. So obviously there are redeeming qualities to this film that even detractors like Atun-Shei, or people like him that would have opinions similar to his, would agree that this, for instance, this battle is probably it's very impressive, very historically accurate, and people watch and rewatch just this many times over.
John, and have your beliefs challenged in a healthy way. Because if you truly know that the Civil War wasn't about slavery, then surely one YouTube video by a confirmed FARB isn't going to change your mind, right? As early as 1922, Vladimir Lenin recognized film as an important tool for spreading political propaganda. In his case, he was trying to reinforce Marxist principles in the minds of the Russian people. But even before Lenin, and certainly ever since, film has been used to further the spread of pretty much every ideology under the sun. There's fascism, anti-fascism, classical liberalism, militarism, anti-militarism, leftism, nationalism, anti-nationalism, theism, anti-theism, anti-colonialism, and so on. But just because these films advocate a certain point of view doesn't automatically make them manipulative or bad. Some propaganda pieces are more insidious than others, and often a film with a bias can be thought-provoking in a positive and enlightening way.
You're all individuals! Yes, we're all individuals! You're all different! Yes, we are all different! I'm not.
That's ironic.
Even if I disagree with the message, I can still dig a good propaganda film if it's well made or entertaining. But whether benignly thought-provoking or blatantly ideological, These movies have one thing in common. The filmmakers are trying to sell you something. In the case of Gods and Generals, director Ron Maxwell is pushing the tired, old, thoroughly debunked right-wing talking points of the lost cause myth. But
See, the thing is he? Because same Ron Maxwell that he's talking about also made the movie Gettysburg, which Atun-Shei, I think even in this short bit, talks greatly about and actually likes it. So is it that Ron Maxwell is trying to portray the pro-lost cause propaganda, as he calls it, or is he just trying to show the Civil War through the eyes of Virginia? And I think it has more to do with him showing it through the eyes of Virginia than any nefarious propaganda right-wing thing. Because Atun-Shei apparently sees right-wing as bad. Well, I'm right-wing, and I am not pro-Confederate, and not pro-lost cause myths either.
I hear you thinking, you've made several videos criticizing Confederate apologists. Your position on this issue is clear. Surely you have a bias of your own. In a way, this video is a piece of propaganda too. Whoa, meta dude! And for that matter, doesn't every filmmaker have their own biases that filter into their work, consciously or not? Well, no. For example, let's briefly look at a film that many consider to be right-wing propaganda, but which actually isn't. S. Craig Zahler's Dragged Across Concrete. It's about two aging, old-school cops who get suspended because they use excessive force while arresting a Latino man. In the scene where their boss breaks the bad news, the cops voice their frustration with political correctness and the liberal distrust of police officers, which they feel inhibits their ability to properly do their job. Some audiences saw this scene as an implicit endorsement of this conservative, anti-PC viewpoint, but nothing could be further from the truth. If you actually watch the movie, which is pretty damn good by the way, it's clear that the characters played by Mel Gibson and Vince Vaughn are not winking at the audience. It's just that they're aging, old-school cops. They've been doxxed by the Twitter outrage machine, so of course they would express those views in that situation. There's a big difference between fictional characters in a movie expressing certain opinions.
Figure a man's only good for one oath at a time. I took mine to the Confederate States of America.
And a filmmaker trying to indoctrinate his or her audience with a specific political agenda.
But then, is Gettysburg that political agenda that he's trying to subvert in the movie? And see, Atun-Shei has a positive view of Gettysburg, same director, but he has a negative view of Gods and Generals, and it's the same director. So, Confederates winning. Has Atun-Shei not read about the Civil War? Robert E. Lee won most of the battles between the Peninsula Campaign all the way to Gettysburg. He only lost one battle at Antietam. So he won the Peninsula Campaign, he won Second Bull Run, he won Chancellorsville, Fredericksburg. That's four battles, 4 major battles. So yes, of course, and that's the time period that this is talking about. So of course Confederates are going to win. Triumphant music? Well, they're winning. Close-up rebel flag. Interesting. About the Civil War. Yeah. I'm sure in Gettysburg there were plenty of close-ups of the rebel flag as well. Yet, Atun-Shei hasn't made any videos about the propaganda of Gettysburg.
I'm about to explain in detail why Gods and Generals fits into the latter category, and in so doing, spits historical accuracy right in the face. Gods and Generals is a stupid movie. It's not Paul Blart Mall Cop kind of stupid. But because it completely lacks depth and nuance, it has to telegraph to the audience what they should be feeling at any given moment.
This is actually a great scene here between Chamberlain and his wife before he goes off to war. Pretty good.
The principal way it does this is through the use of its score. Take this scene, where the Virginia House of Delegates declares that state's intention to secede from the Union.
How could there be union with a section of the country that wants to impose its will through coercion.
Oh, you mean like slavery does? Never mind.
Again, for Virginia was about slavery. The reason why Virginia seceded was Lincoln raised up 75,000 troops. And so they viewed that particular thing as coercion. Now for South Carolina, which was about slavery, they felt that Lincoln preventing slavery expanding westward was coercion. But see, Virginia was more nuanced, and you have to understand the nuance. And Atun-Shei, unfortunately, must not understand that nuance, and he has his sole focus on slavery. If the movie was about South Carolina seceding, and they didn't mention slavery at all, then I would have questions. But we are talking about a very centrist state for the time, where in this state you had a lot of pro-union people and a lot of pro-secession people. The vote for secession in Virginia was very close, by about 18 votes. So it could have swung either way, depending on the feelings of the people or of the men who were voting in the legislature. So it was a close vote. There were a lot of pro-union sympathies in Virginia. Indeed, the North had a lot of Virginian soldiers on their side, Virginian officers or officers from Virginia. So Virginia is just, you have to understand Virginia during the Civil War. For them, it was not about slavery. Indeed, in Virginia, the numbers for slavery had been going down for a long time. By this point, even Robert E. Lee had freed a lot of his slaves just because he couldn't afford them. And slavery was something that was dying. And Virginia didn't even join the rest of the states when they seceded. And indeed, they said at first that there was no constitutional right for secession. Even Robert E. Lee said that. So you just have to understand that Virginia was totally different than South Carolina when it came to the Civil War.
We'll get to that. So at this point, Robert E. Lee has gotten up in front of everybody and accepts the position as commander of the Confederate Army. Watch this and listen carefully. Did you notice that? The soaring, triumphant John Williams-y music? What might have motivated that choice?
And you wanted it to be somber and sad, so you see a whole bunch of men cheering and now it's supposed to be sad. That'd be like taking the movie Lincoln, another great movie, and you know, when they passed the 13th Amendment in the House, all of a sudden you have this somber and sad music while everybody's cheering. It just doesn't make any sense.
What does the director, Ron Maxwell, want us to feel in this moment? Either he's a complete moron and thinks that every rousing speech needs triumphant music, or he wants us to feel inspired and uplifted that the South is seceding from the Union. I'm leaning toward the latter, especially when you see scenes like this.
And in my own Rockford County, only one person voted against leaving the Union.
Probably the village idiot.
Yeah,
That's actually funny. So probably the village idiot was the only one who voted against secession. You just gotta understand, this is a movie showing Virginia secession from the Union, and so that's just how it is. And I as pro-Union as it gets, who has a ancestor who fought at Gettysburg, and there's a memorial to his battery there sitting near Gettysburg College, I have no problem with this. You get to see kind of what it is like. So I think Atun-Shei doth protest too much.
village idiot was the one who wanted to prevent a war. What an idiot! Consider also the sequence depicting the Battle of Chancellorsville. Now, this is as close as Gods and Generals comes to a climactic moment, and historically it was the Confederacy's greatest victory, where Stonewall...
Yes, so why wouldn't you have the great thematic music to it? What, are you going to have violins playing a sad song while it happens? And if you watch, I don't know if it's the same music composer, but if you watch Gettysburg, that also has its own triumphant music many times for both sides. So, and again, the Confederates win all these battles. There's no denying it.
While Jackson brilliantly steamrolled over the Federal right flank. Check out the music in this scene. This cue turns the battle scene into nothing less than neo-Confederate porn. The bellicose chorus turns the Army of Northern Virginia into this unstoppable, completely bad, avenging force. It's meant to get your blood pumping, and it succeeds. It's a great cue. I'm as anti-Confederate as they come, and this scene has even me going, yeah! Pour it into 'em, boys! Finally, let's look at Stonewall Jackson's death scene at the end of the film. Spoilers, by the way. This is an incredibly melodramatic scene. It's just goofy and all over the place, but what's really telling is the heavenly choir singing in the score. It indicates martyrdom, and even though Jackson got pointlessly gunned down by his own men by mistake, his death is depicted as a pseudo-religious sacrifice.
Well, maybe, just maybe, it might be that Stonewall Jackson was a Christian. Now, he was the kind of Christian that would beat slaves and things like that. But he was a Christian man. So, and the movie depicts that he is a Christian man, and I wish... So Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain, another band that they portray in this movie a lot, was also a strong Christian man. And I think they probably should have done a little bit more with Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain and his religious, how would I say it? His religious fervor as well, because he was very fervent in his religion. He was a Congregationalist. So a very good Christian man as well. And they don't do that. But again, this is a movie that focuses on the Virginia side. Now, Gods in General is just the book, the novel, is a long book that covers everything from before the Civil War all the way to right before Gettysburg. We are talking about 2.5 years of this conflict, and you can't fit that all in a movie. So the director decided to take it and see it from the Virginia perspective and just limit it to that. Now, could he have done it from the main perspective and done more on Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain? Sure. That is why this movie is not perfect, and I will never say it, and Gettysburg, for me, is obviously far superior than this one, but this is still a good film. And again, back to Stonewall Jackson. He was a Christian, a strong Christian man. So, of course, it's going to have that. And his death, he did say these things that he says. Now, it was over a few days instead of here where it's all wrapped in one package at one time, but it still happened.
He even has his hand raised in this saintly way. And just before he goes, this look comes across his face like he's seeing the gates of heaven opening.
Well, he probably was. So just because you're an atheist and don't believe in God and things like that, you don't have to go and tear down this part. So very, how should I put this? Simply, thou dost protest too much.
Yeah. It's a Christ-like demise, and the film clearly implies that he gave his life nobly for a good cause. The last shot of the extended edition is a slow push-in on Jackson's coffin, and the stainless banner draped over it.
It's interesting because I am not a fan of the extended edition, mainly because they took out a lot of parts that I really like. For instance, this one part where this slave lady is talking to Winfield Scott Hancock, and she says something to the effect, or she quotes the book of Esther, and General Hancock notices that she quotes the book of Esther and points it out, and she says something to the effect that she wants to be free, she wants her children to be free, and she blesses the Union Army. She asks for God's blessing on the Union Army. So a very moving scene that they took out from the extended cut. And in the extended cut, they have the Battle of Antietam, which is kind of neat to watch. I own both editions. I own the theatrical release and the extended edition, but I just like the theatrical release better. That's just me.
The camera settles on the top left section of the flag to the Confederate cross that we all know and love. This is what Jackson died for, the film is saying. He gave his life to defend what this flag represents.
Well, he did. He did, and that's why I'm not a big fan of the Confederacy. So I respect Stonewall Jackson as a man. I respect Robert E. Lee as a man. But obviously they both took sides, opposing sides, from what I believe is right in this context of the Civil War.
Maxwell's previous Civil War film is not a masterpiece by any means, but it does...
What? It's not a masterpiece? Bro, what were you watching? Unbelievable. Okay, anyway.
Do a pretty good job of maintaining a neutral point.
So the thing is about Gettysburg and Gods and Generals, they're like the only Civil War movies that are out there that are great and focus on the war. So you do have out there the movie Glory, which is about the 54th Massachusetts, an all-black regiment, which is good, but it just doesn't. That one, talking about propaganda, is about a group of black Americans who are fighting for the Civil War and for freedom of their people and to end slavery, so on and so forth. Gettysburg, though, as he just said, is neutral and takes it very neutrally. You could say that Gods and Generals may take it more pro-Confederate side, but it's mainly because it's looking at it from Virginia, their perspective. But he throws in Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain in there. But of course, it's covering a lot longer period than Gettysburg. Gettysburg is just a 3-day battle. Gods and Generals is talking about something for, it's going on for 2 years.
To view. In the immortal words of George Lucas, there are heroes on both sides. It works in Gettysburg because that film focuses on military history. And apart from one little scene...
I'm fighting for my rats. Obviously, that's what we're fighting for. For your what? For our rats.
It doesn't really delve into the social or political history of the 1860s. Not so with Gods and Generals. The first 45 minutes...
But again, we're talking about the beginning of the war. So you have to, if we're talking about the beginning of the war, you have to address those political issues.
Minutes or so are filled with tedious speech after speech about the virtues of the Southern cause.
Just as we would not send any of our soldiers to march in other states and tyrannize other people, so will we never allow the armies of others to march into our state.
Nevertheless, Maxwell...
And that was the main point. That speech by Jackson really encapsulates what Virginia specifically was fighting for. And they were fighting because Lincoln had called up the 75,000 troops, and they did not like that. They thought that it was against the spirit of liberty, and so on and so forth. Had Lincoln not called up those troops and ignored what happened at Fort Sumter, Virginia may have stayed in the Union. But Lincoln he couldn't just let the South get away with firing on a federal fort and basically taking something that had been paid by the American people and by the American government.
Pretends that this film is a no-spin zone, and pretty much spells it out for us in this scene toward the end, where Colonel Chamberlain and his wife go to see a production of Julius Caesar starring John Wilkes Booth.
It's for the audience to decide who is hero and who is villain.
Whoa, meta!
So there's a very good biography called, what was it called? On Greater Fields or something like that. And all on Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain. Very good book. I recommend it. He also wrote The Passing of the Armies, which deals with the end of the Civil War, all the battles toward the end of the Civil War. Another good book. And I recently found out he wrote a second, autobiography, I guess.
Dude! It's frankly insulting that after 4.5 hours of shoving neo-Confederate revisionism down our throats, Maxwell tells us...
But it's not revisionism. It's just the perspective of Virginia, Atun-Shei. So I suggest you delve into why Virginia seceded. because you are imposing the reason why South Carolina seceded onto Virginia. And that's just not the case. I mean, any historian and historical buff of the Civil War will know that South Carolina seceded in December of 1860. Virginia didn't secede until after April 15th of 1861. That's a lot of time there. So Virginia was staying away, and I think Virginia between December 1860 and April 1861, when they eventually seceded, they held a secession vote somewhere in the middle. I can't remember where or when, but I think if I remember right, I might be confusing it with Tennessee, Arkansas, or something like that. But they held a convention earlier for secession, and either they couldn't get enough votes to get a convention to do it, because the people were just not enthused about secession at the time.
Please, make up your own mind, especially since lots of that propaganda is pretty convincing. Take these words that Maxwell puts in Stonewall Jackson's mouth.
If Virginia adheres to the United States, I adhere. Her determination must control mine. This is my understanding of patriotism. And though I love the Union, I love Virginia more.
Which is true. That's how people saw it back then. It wasn't, they knew that they were part of the Union. Many Virginians wanted the Union to continue. They were very pro-Union before Lincoln called up the 75,000 troops. That's just factual. There is nothing in here that is a lie or propaganda.
Sounds reasonable, right? As an American, I value individualism and self-reliance. I love my country, but I do love my family, friends, and local community more. And I would fight for those things if I had to.
The North triumphs. It is not alone the destruction of our property. It is the prelude to anarchy, infidelity, the ultimate loss of free and responsible government on this continent. It is the triumph of commerce, the banks, factories.
Yeah, I hate banks too.
If the Republicans lose their little war, they are voted out in the next election and they return to their homes in New York or Massachusetts or Illinois, fat with their war profits. If we lose our country.
War profiteers are awful. Maybe this whole secession thing isn't as bad as some folks say. Maybe it...
You know, Atun-Shei, maybe you just really think that people who watch this movie are really dumb. So if you are from the South and you're pro-Confederate and you love your ancestors and what they did against the Union, of course you're going to like this movie. But if you're just someone from the North, like myself, who watched this movie, understand the historical context, understand where this is coming from, this doesn't affect you. I have watched Gods and Generals many times, and I am nowhere closer to being pro-Confederate than I was the last time I watched it. So, yeah, I think Atun-Shei just kind of thinks that people who watch this or pro-Union might suddenly become pro-Confederate just because they watched Gods and Generals. Oh my.
Wasn't just all about... Oh look, it's Alexander Stephens.
Again, Alexander Stephens was from Georgia, another Deep South state. Totally different, and I know which speech he's going to go, the Cornerstone speech, and how this is all about slavery, yeah, blah, 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 blah. We all know that. But Virginia didn't secede along with South Carolina and Georgia. They had seceded months earlier.
President of the Confederacy. I wonder what he has to say.
The prevailing ideas entertained by the old Constitution were that the enslavement of the African was in violation of the laws of nature, that it was wrong in principle, socially, morally, and politically. Those ideas, however, were fundamentally wrong. They rested upon the assumption of the equality of races. This was an error. Our new government is founded upon exactly the opposite ideas. Its foundations are laid. Its cornerstone rests upon the great truth that the Negro is not equal to the white man, that slavery, subordination to the superior race, is his natural and moral condition. This, our new government, is the first in the history of the world based upon its great physical, philosophical, and moral
truth.
Again, that is true that he gave that speech, and he gave it before Virginia even seceded from the Union. I think. I could be wrong on that. But anyway, the point I'm trying to make is that Virginia did not secede over slavery. They were going to stay in the Union, but they left because they didn't like that Lincoln called up the 75,000 troops. Or else, if they would have been in complete agreement with the Confederacy, they would have seceded a whole lot earlier. But people like Lee and others were saying, no, secession is wrong and unconstitutional. And they were not willing to secede or leave the Union until Lincoln called up the 75,000 troops, and then they said, okay, this is too far. But they had totally different reasons than South Carolina, Georgia, and the other Deep South states. And again, Lee did not give that speech. So, yeah.
See how easy it is to fall for this lost cause? And if Gods and Generals is a neutral examination of Civil War history, as Maxwell claims, then shouldn't the Yankees get just as much play as the Confederates? Well, yeah, they should, but they don't. Not even close. With the exception of the Chamberlain brothers, Buster Kilrain, and Winfield Scott Hancock, all of whom are minor, incidental characters, the Yankees in this film are either portrayed as bureaucrats.
I trust you're not being too hasty yourself, Colonel. This is a great opportunity for you to serve your country.
Politicians.
I congratulate the Army that the numbers of casualties have been comparatively so small.
Compared to what?
To you,
The Scots at Culloden.
Or generals who don't listen to good advice from their subordinates.
Well, you know, we all know Burnside didn't listen to good advice, and he sure didn't give any good advice during all his years of war. Even though he was a good Corps commander, but man, when it came to Army command, oh man, he was terrible, and he knew it. He even told Lincoln he didn't want the job, but Lincoln gave it to him anyway. But yeah, so I mean, who likes their politicians today? Nobody. No conservative likes their politician, and no liberal likes their politician. So yeah, I think all the politicians are heavily disliked even today, as they were back then. Politicians are very condescending people a lot of times. You will find very few humble politicians.
General Hancock, I certainly appreciate your efforts at reconnaissance, but this possibility has been considered and rejected.
And there's no lie there. I mean, it's true. That's basically how the conversation went.
And of course, plundering, thieving violators of our homes and firesides.
But this happened again. Like nothing Atun-Shei is attacking is false. That's the problem with his whole thing. It's not false. This did happen.
This is an old lost cause stereotype of the Union Army, that it was an aggressive, invading force that attacked Southern civilians, burned their homes, and confiscated their property. While this sort of thing did occasionally happen,
but it happened at Fredericksburg, which is what that movie is showing. They did go in there and loot a lot of things and burn a lot of things. There's no lie in it.
The worst offenses weren't committed by the regular Federal Army, but by pro-Union paramilitaries, particularly out west in Kansas and Missouri.
What the is this red leg doing here? You said regular federal authorities would be handling this.
Captain Terrell is the regular federal authority now.
Captain Terrell is a bloodthirsty son of a... He is a looter and a pillager.
So Maxwell goes out of his way to portray the Confederates as plucky rebels fighting against an evil federal empire. And with a couple notable exceptions...
Well, that's how they saw themselves. Especially when thinking about Virginia, just Virginia. That's how they saw themselves. And there's nothing wrong with showing that. Of course, I would have been pro-federal, just because I don't agree with the Confederacy or the reasons why they seceded. I do think there is, even Lincoln said this, there is cause for secession if the federal government is not fulfilling its constitutional obligations. But at this point, especially starting in 1860, when Lincoln hadn't even been president yet, these states were just seceding, just because they didn't like an election outcome. So the federal government, they hadn't violated the Constitution yet. So them seceding was totally wrong.
That wasn't the case historically. Secession was orchestrated by an aristocratic planter class that correctly anticipated the imminent end of American slavery that was so vital to the Southern economy.
Again, yes, for South Carolina, Florida, Georgia, Mississippi, Alabama, all the Deep South states. Yes, that is true. But that wasn't the point of view that this movie decided to go in. It decided to go in from the point of view of Virginia. Again,
Even
for the
white
1000th
Southerners who
time.
advocated conditional abolitionism, such as phasing slavery out over a long period of time, knew that without millions of free laborers, the agrarian economy of the cotton states would suffer, maybe even collapse.
But Virginia was not a cotton state. That's the thing. The cotton states were Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana, South Carolina, Georgia. Those were the cotton states. Virginia was not a cotton state. They dealt mostly with regular crops for consumption, not cotton.
The planters, who had enormous political influence, ultimately decided that they would rather rip the country in half than risk their bottom line.
Which is true for if we're talking about South Carolina. But you're showing a whole bunch of Virginians here, Mr. Shea. You're not showing South Carolinians. Yes, I agree with you. South Carolina was all about that life of we are going to lose our slaves, our cotton, our free labor. Sure, I would agree with you if we're talking about South Carolina, but we're talking about Virginia, which was not the case.
Most of the famous Confederate soldiers came from the planter class. Robert E. Lee was born rich, the son of a dynastic political family. His father was governor of Virginia, and his uncle served in the Continental Congress during the Revolutionary War.
You see, it's here a Lee, there a Lee, and everywhere a Lee, a Lee.
Jeb Stuart's
I have not yet seen that movie, American. I think it's called Revolution or something. It's like a musical, and since I've seen that clip, I don't know if I want to watch it. Yeah, I don't know if I would be able to take the American Revolution seriously after I see that.
Father was a plantation owner and career politician. Nathan Bedford Forrest, though born poor, amassed a huge fortune before the war through speculation and slave trading. My boy James Longstreet grew up on a plantation. P.T. Beauregard was from a stinking rich family in DeParish. George Pickett came from old Virginia money and got most of his career opportunities through nepotism. Thomas J. Jackson, well, Stonewall was a bit different, but we'll get more into that later. Yet in Gods and Generals, we see privileged, elitist Yankees in a parlor with their whiskey and cigars, while the Confederates huddle around a simple campfire with their men. Y'all need to stop pretending that these guys were men of the people. They weren't. They were men of privilege, dedicated to preserving the status quo. And just what was that status quo?
It is the systematic coercion of one group of men over another.
See, there you go. Ron Maxwell put it right in there. And that is a very serious indictment toward the South and this scene. So Maxwell left it in there, something I wholeheartedly agree with. Yeah, Lee was an aristocrat, as well as most of the men that served in the Confederacy. But a lot of the northern generals were also that. And yeah, and actually Lee did stay a lot in the field. Probably a lot more than other generals who normally, northern generals who like to, look for the mansions and stuff like that to stay in. But that's not to say Lee wasn't in a mansion. I mean, they even showed a clip in here of him sitting there in a mansion with a whole family around a Christmas tree.
Well said, Chamberlain, you overhyped hack. Strong Vincent rolls in his grave every time the history...
Strong Vincent is from, what's that town called? It's up near Fort LeBeouf it's only about 45 minutes from where I currently live. And I just happened, Fort LeBeouf was where Washington delivered his letter. And I went up there to go see where he did that. And I'm looking at the statue of George Washington that they have there, a young George Washington. And then I go over and I see this blue historical marker. And I go over there and it says that Colonel Strong Vincent was born in this town. And I thought, oh, wow, I did not know that. So that was kind of neat to see.
Books mention you. By the way, this scene with the Chamberlain brothers is interesting.
Freeing the slaves wasn't a war aim when this all began, but war changes things. It sorts things out.
I don't know, Lawrence. I mean, not everybody feels the way we do about the darkies. especially when it comes to fighting and dying.
This is the only racial slur used by anyone in the entire movie. This neutral, nonpartisan Civil War film features one racial slur, and it comes out of the mouth of a Union soldier. And how do the Confederate characters treat black people? Why, like members of the family, of course.
Alright, so I'm going to stop it there. So when it comes to the historical thing, again, Atun-Shei is just convoluting the reason why South Carolina seceded with the reason why Virginia seceded. And I don't really like, he's doing his own, which he pointed out, he's doing his own type of propaganda. So, I don't mind the movie. It's good. If I ever do The Big Lie, I do have more of a problem because the way they portray slaves in the South in that movie I don't like. I think they probably should have kept it out that way. There was not that implication. And in the second part, I think he has a little bit more of a leg to stand on. But for the first part, in my opinion, Atun-Shei is doing a bait and switch. I think that would be the term. Or a straw man, building a straw man argument. Instead of he's saying that Virginia and South Carolina were the same, and they were not. The reasons why they seceded were different. So that's my opinion on it. So stick around. I might do another video on, or I'm looking forward to doing a video on the Matt Walsh Civil War and what he's going to say to it. So anyway, like, comment, share, subscribe, do all that good stuff for me, and we will see you in the next video. Bye.